ready for phase one?
What's going on, guys? It's Excessive, Team Stealth Rocks, the best move in the game, coming at you with our NPBL recap for Week 6 after missing our Week 5 recap. We're coming here with a Week 6 recap. I'm joined by a new format today. Marv's not going to be joining us, but we have two guests with us. Let's introduce everyone's favorite NPBL player, Shaymin. How you doing, man?
How's it going, Excessive? Happy to be on the show.
Glad, I'm looking forward to it. You're always having the hot takes in general chat, so it's going to be nice to have you on here. Make sure to check out Shaymin's power rankings. And then also joined by one of my personal favorite guys from a league I've played in the past, the RDL. You guys have heard me talk about it before. The one and only Sam. What's going on, man?
Not a whole lot. It's a good morning. Happy to be on.
Good. So we're gonna do a little bit different subject, different format today from what you guys are used to. We without Marv, we're no longer going to do Marv's reacts, and we've trimmed some of the power rankings with him not on to elaborate on some of the stuff. And we're gonna have Sam and Shaymin kind of talk us through our guest segment, which will be a news piece hopefully here on the NPBL going forward. So let's try to get this rolling. You guys ready to do some game review?
Absolutely.
All right, here we go. How about Shaymin, take us through the first game of the week here. Talk us through what you thought between the first match here, the Seattle Seadras and the Detroit Dracos.
Definitely. So right off the bat, we see that this was a 6-0, which is pretty big, and it mostly comes down to not having Aurora Veil on the Nine Tails. That's pretty big. I feel really bad because I was supposed to look over the team. I'm sorry, champ. I don't know how to make it up to you, but
I mean, at the end of the day, Champ Lando A will be fine. He's a great battler, and I'm not worried about, this isn't that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. And to be realistic, dude, you can have people look over your team as much as you want, but it comes down to you have to be able to check in your own sets too. Like, I mean, last year, 2 seasons ago at this point, I forgot speed boost one time on my Mega Sharpedo, and it ended up costing me a game. So you have to check stuff before it goes into the game itself. Not much to really review. Without having Aurora Veil, I feel like Lando kind of got behind pretty early and threw in the towel relatively early. Sam, I know you watched some of the games. You're not super familiar with the teams. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's much to really talk in depth about this game. Anything you wanted to add about the Seattle-Detroit game?
Not really. I took a look at it, and it did seem like the Aurora, or the lack of Aurora Veil on Ninetales kind of threw things a little bit early. Imprison was kind of interesting tech. I think we were talking about that before the show as being kind of a way to keep Ditto from getting Aurora Veil.
Very true. Very good tech.
Yeah.
I'm looking at his roster. I guess he has Mandibuzz, which is a pretty good defogger. So
yes.
To me, it's one of those things where the tech is really cool, but when you have such a good defogger in Mandibuzz, you can kind of just go there if in the kind of edge case that Ditto manages to get Aurora Veil.
You could argue that you don't want Mandibuzz taking Moonblast or Blizzard from a Ditto Aurora Veil. I mean, I don't hate it. Mm-hmm. It didn't work out. Sometimes you got to go for it. I feel like
it's fair. I think that sometimes if that's really what you fear, you run the tech. Then
yep.
And that's cool.
It was a cool tech.
That's honestly, I would have never seen that coming.
No, that was very, very clever. I definitely did not. I actually, again, if you watch some of the people watch the battle videos I put out, I had no idea. I know what a prison is, but he clicked it, and I was like, I don't know what this move does. I had to stop and look it up. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. You can't use it, but it's not something I look too often. So yeah, if it would have worked, I've been very salty at the time, but it would have been good prep by Lando. Let's move forward. Yeah. Go ahead. If you have anything to say, Shaymin, before you read us into the next game here, you can wrap us up with this one, and then move on to the next game.
So, the one thing I did notice that most of the time we say that when Lando loses because he did not click U-turn enough.
Yes.
In this game, it seemed like he almost clicked U-turn too much. He didn't have any mons left, and he's clicking U-turn instead of just trying to get damage off, and then he doesn't have things to switch in.
I think at one point Lando had just thrown in the towel, but Sam, Lando's known as we call Champ Lando the Seattle Seadras. He's Mr. Volt Turn. The guy clicks U-turn almost every member of his team a high percentage of his team. One time Shaymin ran the stats and actually crunched all the numbers to see how much more Lando clicks U-turn than the average player in our league, and it was
Oh my gosh.
it was pretty funny. But yeah, so yeah, it's just one of those funny kind of memes that goes around our league. But go ahead, Shaymin. Let's go talk about this next game. Wisconsin Wishcasses, Lincoln Lanterns, the other member of Team Stealth Rocks, and Marv. Let's review this one really quick.
Yeah, so early game, it was actually really close. It was looking like Wisconsin was going to take it, but Marv pulled the late game, like, I'm not going to call it like a comeback because it was just really close, but he closed it off and took the 2-0. Big plays coming out with his Seismitoad just knocking off the Tangrowth assault vest to ensure that Gengar would be able to take it out. And it's just one example of like an early game prediction that can really pay off in the end.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. The thing I like to point out, again, Mike's been trying to get better. I really like some of the improvements Mike has made, and we can review a little bit of this, but I think even Mike noticed it himself, but the Reuniclus set was...
Yeah, that was my takeaway too.
Yeah.
I think Mike noticed it himself. I think Mike even commented during the game in chat, like, oh gosh, either I don't know if he misprepped or just forgot a move or if that was an active thing, but that was... I think, honestly, that... I don't want to say cost Mike the game, but I think if that Uniclus set was a little bit finer tuned or had better coverage moves for the... that's a simple thing, and we'll have Sam kind of talk about it in a little bit more detail in a few seconds here, but that's a simple thing going, I have a Uniclus, what is his dark type switch in, or what is his switch into my Uniclus? The switch in, the thing that screams off the top of my head on Marv's team is that Incineroar, and you didn't have, and then, so in addition to that, the only other coverage move you put on that set is Energy Ball, which is also resisted by Incineroar, so it was just, it was rough.
Seismitoad is not as big a threat to it as Incineroar.
Yeah.
You're happy to like click, Psyshock or Psychic and just get your stab hits off on Seismitoad.
So yeah, I don't know. So like that's again, Mike's been making improvements. He's made free agent moves. He's made a more dangerous team. He's playing teams in this league that are notoriously good. Lincoln Lanterns, Seattle Seadras. I believe Mikey has played you as well, Shaymin, and it was relative. Was it a 3-0 or 2-0?
No, they've all of his battles against like previous playoff teams have all been like 2-0s or 2 or 1-0s.
Yeah, so he's playing people tight, but he's missing like that final step. So I think just keep working at Mike and you'll get there. Anything you want to say, Sam?
No, that's covers it pretty well. Like I mean, it seems like a good team. What Zard is that? Is it Mega
Y.
X or Mega Y?
That is Y.
Oh, Y is interesting. Y is such a good wall breaker.
Yes.
And and yeah, Reuniclus on that team, fantastic mon. That thing can win games by itself. Cobalion, yeah, even the speed tiers on this team look fairly good just from the 6 that I can see. Yeah, I mean it's a good team, and I think that also you mentioned Mike recognizing in chat oh shoot, I should have brought Focus Blast Shadow Ball. Recognizing those things is what makes people better.
Exactly.
I'm always happy to help coaches who come back in and who are just after a battle they're just oh, I should have done X, Y, and Z, and it's well, the fact that you know what you did wrong is really helpful. But yeah, it's always interesting to me to see where coaches come in and they say sometimes people will say, oh, I don't know what I did wrong, and that's always a little bit worrying to me, because the first step to getting better is being able to realize where you made mistakes in prep and where you made mistakes in battling.
Self reflection. I feel like you will learn more from your losses than you do your wins. Being able to sit down and go, where did it go wrong? What could I have done different? I think it's a very important skill in order to improve as a Pokemon battler or in general gaming and a lot of things beyond that.
And real quick to flip that as well, you can win games in Pokemon while not playing particularly well and have a little bit of a false sense of security. You can be losing games playing well, and that's probably better for you in terms of the long run and learning how to improve rather than winning against.
That was me last season.
Yeah,
I out prepped people and got wins, and then when I faced someone Excessive who would be able to prep just as well as I would, I got totally crushed.
It happens sometimes. Anyways, we ready to move on?
Yeah, ready to move on. Go ahead.
Sweet.
So we got the next game here was the upset of the week, I think it's fair to say, in the Massachusetts Metapods taking down the Pittsburgh Primarinas Adam was on a
Oh.
little bit of a roll here. I think he lost his season opener against Lantern, and then he buzzsawed several teams in a row, including yours truly. It was looking really dominant, and then it came down to a very again, this game, this game's gonna have some controversy around it. So, Shaymin, let's hear your thoughts on it first before we kind of. This is the game I want to spend a little bit more time on here. So let's talk about this one.
Yeah, so late game, Adam was just not prepared for Comfey.
Yeah. Oh, this was the Comfey game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Looking over it like with a very, very hindsight like view, I was able to kind of think of a way that Adam probably could have won this game with just his 3 mons left, but is such a hard mon to face, and his team was just not prepared. I think the big one comes down to when he clicked quick attack against Comfey. He has to realize that triage boosts it by 3, the priority by 3, and quick attack only has a priority of 1. So that was the moment where you knew it was all over for Adam, because losing your low punny and then you're gonna have a full health Comfey.
Yeah, so I'm not yet. This one, a lot happened, and again, it's a longer game. Adam does a good job of kind of dictating the pace early, and I didn't watch this game live. All right, you guys talk for a second. I'm gonna deal with this. Hold on.
Yeah. Yeah, early game. I mean, Adam was very, very good. It's just late game Comfey was very good. I mean, we have to give props to TP because he knew what his win condition was and he kept it around and then he used it appropriately.
Yeah, I think that was a good spot in the game. It was interesting to see how everything went down because Adam did control the game early. He had the Scarf on Haunter fairly well, and managed to catch Mega B with it, which was, I think, like a really, really interesting point. That was the point which I was like, wow, this guy's in control of the game. But like,
yeah, Adam had complete control.
Yeah, I'll agree there. I think what Adam needs to sit down here again. It's unfortunate that he lost, and I'm not saying that Hacks didn't play. Kind of what you said earlier, Sam. It's the game we play. It has its unfortunates, its crits, its critical hits, misses, flinches, things along those lines, and that definitely played a role in this loss. I'm not saying that Adam didn't play well enough to win. He clearly did. He puts himself in a very good position to win. But the thing that I personally think of is you can't really control when there's certain circumstances you can, obviously based on abilities and moves, but for the most part you can't affect when crits happen, like or defense drops and stuff like that. Like that's all chance. That's part of, so it's kind of putting yourself in a position of minimizing the the loss from those moves, and if you lose to it, you lose to it. But in my mind, I think Adam, either through prep or maybe slight play, like you said, Shaymin, could have probably, hindsight bias being what it is, I'm able to sit down and look at the game after the fact. I think Adam could have pulled this one out 9 times out of 10. Maybe he does. I don't know. So I guess any thoughts kind of on that general sentiment? Maybe have if Comfy, I don't know Comfy's full set. I don't know what he was rocking. If it had a heal bell, did we see its full set, or we just see Calm Mind, Draining Kiss? Was that the only 2 moves he clicked? Was Calm Mind and Draining Kiss?
I think so. I think that was.
It may at that point maybe it was did it have like a heal bell or aromatherapy? Maybe it did have that. So maybe he couldn't have statused it. But when you have a threat like that if you're worried about a Calm Mind threat or a Stally threat like that, like there's ways to attack it. You got if you have trick options, if you have taunts, if you have encores, like there's moves that like. Besides just trying to brute force your way through it, maybe if Adam could have sat down and thought of a more clever way to approach it. He's a great battler. Adam's a great battler. I have no doubt that he'll bounce back from this, and I think he's got a tough game coming up here. But yeah, I guess any closing thoughts before we move on to our next game?
Well, like Adam in general, and like in the general chat, said multiple times that he knew Comfey was the big threat. But his response to it was, "Oh, he has Comfey. I'm gonna lose." I think prepared a good team to handle it as well. It's not like his team was just unable to handle it. I think Adam, you just need to have some more confidence. Like you prepared for Comfey. When you see that come, don't panic. You just do what you planned, and I think you'll be fine.
And yeah, It is a big threat, but I feel like it's one of those things that like Comfey, like I know people who just like love that mon, but in my opinion, it's like it takes a while to get going, and he just about beat it. Honestly,
Yeah,
like,
it got
so
close
multiple times, and like there's a crit on Shaymin that's unfortunate, and like maybe you wish you could get more Spadef drops and things, but like
I mean, but like
I think that like
yeah.
even at the very end, I think that like if he roosted with Zeus with the Zapdos, I'm not sure if he actually had roost. He showed I think what U-turn and T-bolt. He may have been more offensive, but like the right Zapdos set will do just fine. You know, Whirlwind is good, even though it wasn't like particularly good in this instance with Comfey being the last thing. You know, like if Comfey's the last mon, obviously you can't like roar it out or anything. But like even like I think Haunter gets clear smog maybe. Like there's options. There's things in there.
On the
I'm
roster,
gonna check that real quick.
Yeah, on the roster, I agree. We don't want to need to beat a dead horse. You know, Adam feels bad enough about the loss, and you know.
Yeah, but it was close.
Yeah,
it
was
really
close.
did.
It was definitely a very close game.
Yeah,
it came down to seed flares in the end. I mean, if he had one more seed flare, or if he'd gotten one Spadef drop earlier, and like hit, it was game.
Agreed.
And that's really that's always a bad feeling, you know.
Yeah. We'll move on here. Gothberg Murkrows, Washington Redskins, Shy Crow versus one of our replacement coaches for Rich. And Atlas back in the NPBL, coming off, showing a little bit of the rust here, but I'm so glad Atlas is back. Atlas was always kind of a nice, you know, he brought a high. I think he was a playoff team last year. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. He took the. I think it was I believe it was the last spot because I played him round 1 and I was the 3rd.
Okay. Yeah, so he came in like I don't know. He came in. He was very good. He was a very good skill mix up for the league. I'm glad he's back. I think he's inherited a team with a very bad record, and showing a little bit of the rust here versus Shikro, who's starting to hit his stride on a little bit of a win streak here, getting the big 5-0. Alakazam, man, Mega Alakazam is a.
Yeah, Shikro was not afraid just to stay in and click moves.
The speed, it hits so hard. It's so fast. Like it's a good mon. Like
oh yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna make plays, Shikro was up, and I just like it. He was playing very aggressive. He just wanted to get damage off, and he was not afraid just to stay in and just kill things.
Yeah,
and I think once you see that like Aromatisse is gone, because he nukes Aromatisse with Kieran Black, right?
Yep. Yes, he does.
Sub-Zero slammers it.
Yep.
That was a fantastic play. And then after that, you know, once that thing's gone, Focus Blast really doesn't have switch-ins. Like Zam just like lost his switch-ins. You know that Empoleon has Shuka Berry, so it's not going to be some kind of Chople surprise set. I mean, he just went in. It was really fun to watch.
Good, yeah. Small error by Atlas, I would say, in revenging the Kieran with Empoleon. I thought that was a little bizarre.
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't have Accelerock or something along those lines, but I think just Lycanroc generally outspeeds, off the top of my head, outspeeds. So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
I mean, unless Atlas like EV'd it to only outspeed things with the 2x sand boost.
True, that could be very true. You know, hindsight bias being what it is. I also do like very briefly to talk about Atlas's team since he took over. He's just gone full sand. Rich had kind of like a half sand team with some trapping and other things. Like Atlas has just gone all in on the sand. Like he's the sand team. Every week you're gonna have to deal with sand being up. He's got multiple setters. I think does he have 3 sand setters?
He has Hippowdon and Tyranitar.
He dropped Gigalith.
Technically, the Leafeons have a sand team as well. They also have Excadrill.
That's right. I forgot that the Leafeons are also partial sand team.
It's kind of interesting to have dual setters because T-Tar likes its item, and so like having like Hippowdon there, and you can run Smooth Rock to get like more turns of sand if you want it. That is kind of an interesting choice. Like I could see that kind of working, and because T-Tar and Hippowdon are just such different Pokemon, like they're different types. Different strengths and weaknesses. They do different things. Like that's actually really.
I do like.
I kind of like that. That's kind of cool.
I do like that. I agree with that completely. Like they serve. T-Tar can be run defensive or offensive, set up like it very
Mhm.
wide threat. Paladin's usually going to be a defensive set, but it doesn't like pigeonhole you into bringing T-Tar exclusively every week just if you want
Uh-huh.
sand. Like I like that a lot. I think that's a really smart move by Atlas. I think with Lycanroc, to debate that if it's the best sand sweeper, but it's a dangerous Pokemon. Rock Stab's pretty good from an
Mhm.
offensive standpoint. Sand Rush is good. Again, Atlas will probably be hard pressed to make the playoffs, but his remaining schedule is going to make him dangerous for the people he does play. For a sneak, there's a tight playoff race, and you don't want to be coming up against Atlas and the Sand team and taking some
Oh yeah.
L's. So he might play spoiler a little bit going down the road here, but
If you need to beat Atlas to clinch, you're in a tough spot.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a fun thing when you take over teams. Sometimes, like you take over a team with a bad record, typically, like because those are the kinds of teams that often drop.
Yep.
And you can just have fun with it. You can kind of play the role of spoiler late in the season if you want. Like
Try some different stuff out. I agree with that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed taking over teams for that reason. It's just like there's just less pressure.
Yeah. Then Gothberg, shoutouts to Shy Crow. I think how many games has Shy Crow in a row now? Is this his second win or third win in a row?
Didn't he lose the TP last week?
Oh, you're right. He did lose the TP last week. He did lose.
Other than that, he is on a win streak, I believe.
3 out of 4, something along those lines. Like he had a rough start, but that was one of our favorite drafts starting off the season, and he's been on a roll. He's been putting in the time, prepping. Haven't had a chance to. This is the one YouTube video I haven't watched this week. Was his battle against Atlas? So I'll try to check.
It was fun to watch. He was very hype.
Okay, I'll have to check that one out. All right, so let's try to wrap up this game review. Sky Shaymin yourself, you versus the Lexington Leafeons and our rotating door of coaches here, playing Kelly, who bopped me last week, and I've played Kelly before in other leagues. He's a solid battler, so a 5-0 versus Kelly was really good. He brought some unique sets. I really liked the muck set he brought versus you, but you handled it really well and put him away. Any thoughts you want to kind of share about that game really quick?
Natural Gift Electric Sylveon. It's fun. I definitely think it's a fun set, but Physical Sylveon is not breaking through a Celesteela.
Mm-hmm.
Is Natural Gift a special move or a physical move?
I believe it's physical.
It's physical.
Is it
definitely.
physical? Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely physical.
I used Natural Gift Poison Dug Trio to trap and kill a Bulu recently. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, physical.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's a fun set.
I like that.
I can't take credit for that. I saw that in another league, and I was like, "That's cool." Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was an interesting set. It obviously was not very successful, but it was definitely a fun set. I know Callie said that he didn't have too much time to prep, so he tried to make good things.
He brought the heat still, though. Jesus.
Yeah.
I didn't have much time to set. I didn't have much time to prep. Let's bring Natural Gift Electric Berry. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was
Pursuit
cool.
on Mega Alt was also really neat, I thought.
To
switching out. That's good tech.
I sadly didn't have enough investment that I could put into attack to make it to kill without rocks, and of course I didn't have rocks up at the time. But yeah, it was definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I felt like I prepped pretty well. I was prepared for pretty much everything.
It was a close game. I'm glad to see you play Marv next coming up, and Marv's always good. Marv's got a good roster. You got a good roster. This is gonna be a pretty cool game.
It's gonna be very hype for sure.
Team Stealth.
Celesteela, Mega Altaria, Zeraora, Mamoswine, just the stuff that I could see from this roster looks fun.
It's
honestly.
a nasty team, dude. He's got probably one of the first or second highest pre-draft ranking draft team when we did our draft review. But he's got his Shaymin's been playing I kind of put Shaymin on me and Marv kind of put Shaymin on blast because he's always been really good at building, but he never drafts serious teams. And this he finally has. He's finally been smashing people, so it's been nice to see. So he's the only undefeated team left in the league, but he's come. I think his next 3 games are versus Lincoln,
Marv, Adam, and then you Excessive, which is going to be very tough.
The gauntlet. We got a whole bunch of playoff teams in a row here, but let's wrap up this game review really quickly. Talk about the Chicago Chadots and the Ray 3 Bombies. Gumi finally getting a win. The Ray 3 Bombies finally getting on the board with a big 4-0. Ivan, we were hyped him up. The meme team, Chadot team. Chicago is known as our meme team. Sam, he drafts all kinds of wacky stuff all the time just because it's fun for him. That's how he has fun with Mons, and that's what we encourage here. Draft what we want to have fun with. But not only was he doing that, but he was freaking rocking people with it. He brought some wacky stuff, including like a nasty plot baton pass Mr. Mime at one point and passed it into his choice scarf Chada and like should have swept with it. It was heat, dude. But he's been on a little bit. He's been on a little bit of a slide lately, so gotta bring back that meme magic. I don't know what's going on, Ivan. Anything you want to really point out from this game, Shaymin?
Yeah, I think Ivan needs to pull up a damage calculator because he brought in xCloud, like something died, and then he brings in xCloud on a Cloister that was already after a Shell Smash, and I think it had no chance of living that. I mean, it only took 4 Icicle crashes to, not Icicle crashes, but Icicle Spears.
Yeah.
This is a 5-hit move, and it only took 4 to take it out. So I think a calc there and just like taking a little bit more time to think out what you're going to do, I think you'd be in a much better spot for the game.
Yeah. Slowing down, thinking through your game plans, running like a little bit. You don't have to calc every move. Marv's notorious for calking literally the entire. Like when you play Marv, you spend 10 minutes between each turn because he calcs every single move that your Pokemon learns against whatever his set is. Probably that's
my gosh, I hate that.
I'm exaggerating slightly, but I like to poke fun at Marv for that. But calcing key stuff like that, I think people are going to give you some slack if you take a minute and a half to calc. Like you in 3DS, do you have a 3-minute timer between moves?
No, you actually have you have 100 seconds between moves. So you have to if you want to calc something, you have to be kind of quick about it.
Yeah,
if you set up, then you're good to go.
But yeah,
I've never run out of time trying to calc.
I think
something.
very rarely have I ever run. Occasionally, I run out of time. I do calc a lot. I'm a calcer, but again, with the 3DS, you're on a timer, and I've never stalled anyone out though, or timer stalled anyone out. Yeah. Well, I can get into that debate with you off camera.
we can talk about that later. I definitely did that to someone by not deliberately, but go on.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, taking a little bit of time to calc stuff. I think you had options to revenge the Cloister if you had Ice Shard or something. I don't know his sets. But good for Gumi finally getting his win. Gumi's been a little bit of a downturn. Former playoff team 2 seasons ago, was very up and coming team. I think just keep on the grind, Gumi. Keep, trying to prep. Take a little bit of time to prep. Always feel free to reach out to us if you want help with, feedback on sets or anything like that. Anything we want to say about this game before we move into power rankings, Shaymin?
I think Gumi's definitely bouncing back. This is a very big win for him, and I think it's a big confidence booster as well. So he can stop having that I'm the worst attitude.
No,
because
Gumi,
you're not a good attitude. Gumi, you're a great battler. You beat Marv in the playoffs once. You are
Gumi. Yeah, you're on a downturn. Everyone has rough times. Just keep working at it, man. You'll get there.
And yeah, I don't know. Everyone has stretches where they don't play well, or they feel like they're not playing well, or you have bad matchups or something. It's just it's the nature of the game. Everyone's gonna have up and down switch, ups and downs, just kind of oscillating between the two.
For sure. So. Let's move this forward. We've spent about a half hour now on game review, and we got quite a lot of stuff to go through here. We're gonna move on next to our power rankings. Shaymin does a great PR underdoc every week, kind of ranks the teams and puts out a lot of thought onto them. So Shaymin, we're going to have you kind of lead the discussion. You don't have to read word for word what you said for each team, but let's go, groups of 4, starting at the top, work our way to the bottom. Give us some kind of your flash notes version of your rankings, and we'll kind of talk about them from there.
Definitely. So, of course, I think my top 2 are pretty obvious just because, my top 4, are pretty obvious picks. Shaymin, myself, and then Marv is pretty obvious because I'm the only undefeated and the only 1-loss team. You and Adam were a tough 2 to pick from because I wasn't sure who should be above the other. Adam came off a very close loss. You came off of a very big win over another top team. But I decided to go with Adam just because he does have the win over you, and it was a very close loss.
I 100% agree with that assessment. I think Adam's body of work has been better. I think the close loss. When we played head to head, he blew me out. And my win kind of has a nice asterisk next to it because I just think Lando, like, I mean, again, it's not my fault that Lando prepped poorly or didn't catch something in prep, but that you can't. But I think, yeah, and that's fine. I'm 100% fine with your top four. I think that's pretty accurate reflection of kind of where people are in the league. I think when you get down to that 5 through 8 area, it's a little bit more fun to talk about. So, you want to go through those next?
Yeah, definitely. I think Champ Lando at 5 is pretty obvious, just because he is still a 2-loss team. His only 2 losses are to two people who are in the semifinals 2 seasons in a row. One of excessive. You and I, especially you, were champion last season. So I mean, his losses are very good losses, even though one is a 6-0. And here I have TP, Shy Crow, and then Mike. TP and Shy Crow are the 3-win, 3-loss teams. TP coming off a big win over Adam. I mean, it was only a 1-0, but still beating someone as good as Adam is very big. And he also has a win over Shy Crow, so that puts him above him, in my opinion. Shy Crow, though, definitely, even though I don't think he moved up like position wise, he definitely moved up, like in my opinion of him. Very big win this week. Then I have Mike at 8, just because he still only has 2 wins, is it? Yeah, he has
Correct. Yep.
2 wins like Ivan, but I definitely think he's above the 1-win teams, and his losses, he has some very like good losses, so I think that he will probably end up being fine in the end.
Yeah. I didn't agree with most of these. It's tough between Shy Crow and the TP Massachusetts Metapods. I think that's a very close one in that Shy Crow's team I like better. Looking back to the beginning of the season,
Most definitely.
Metapods are kind of another semi-meme team. It's the full U-turn / Volt turn team. Every single Pokemon in his roster knows either U-turn or Volt switch, so it's kind of funny. But all of a sudden, he finds himself in a playoff race here. Again, top 6 make it, and then he's got the head-to-head win over Shy Crow. But Mike's hot on their heels. Very interesting part of the bracket is this, that 6 through, you could almost say 6 through 9 teams are all kind of fighting here. And then these, the 1 through 5 teams are all going to start to cannibalize a little bit, each other a little bit. You play, I think your next 3 games are against top 3 teams or top 4 teams, depending on what
2, 3. I go 2, 3, 4 right now.
Based on this
my
season
next
now.
3 weeks.
So teams are these upper tier teams are gonna be taking losses, just cannibalizing each other, falling down a little bit. I think Seattle and Pittsburgh play this week too. So you get a big opportunity that if you're sitting on that 6 through 8, or maybe the Chicago, who I believe has 2 wins, you have an opportunity to kind of push up the power rankings and push up the playoff picture, the playoff race as well here. So really tight coming up here. I agree with most of your assessments. You put a lot of thought into the power ranking, so it's always fun to read through. You can't blame TP. TP did what he needed to do to put himself in a position to win. Did he get a little bit lucky? Sure. But you know what?
Yeah.
He put himself in a bit close enough position to win. Ray 3 Bombays, Washington Redskins, Lexington Leafeons, Chicago Chad. Let's talk us through these last 4.
Okay, yeah, definitely. So these are the 1-win teams, though I guess technically Ivan has 2 wins, but one of them is a forfeit. So these are like the air quote 1-win teams. I definitely think Gumi coming off a big 4-0 win puts him higher than Ivan, even though Ivan does have that forfeit win. And I have Atlas at 10, and then the Leafeons at 11. I know Atlas is a great coach, and if this was like preseason rankings and Atlas picked like was a coach from week 1, Atlas would be way higher. It's just that he is at this point 1-5, so it's gonna be really hard for him to get up much higher. The Leafeons are not 12 just because they do have a win over you, which is really big, but I don't know. The performance this week was just not the same as last week.
Plus, it's a rotating door of coaches. Like we got another new coach taking over the Lexington Leafeons this week, so it's hard to really rank them high when it's who knows like the skill level, the drop off. Does a person like the team? So I see what you mean.
Exactly. And yeah, and then Ivan, he's a friend of mine, and I can't really put him higher than where he is just because he's been playing pretty bad. It's
Hey man,
like
he's your in real life friend. If you wanna talk trash about him, go ahead.
yeah, especially, but I will say something this. Have a second win, although it is a forfeit win, and I can't really move him up because of it in my power rankings. Really move up, and that one extra win will definitely help him in the playoff race.
For sure.
So
For
he
sure.
is 12, but he's not out yet. I mean, Ivan, you just prep and play a little bit better, and I think you got it.
All right, let's move on to game of the week. Moving up here, talking about Ivan, talking about TP. We got our 2-win Chicago Chatout team, our 3-win Massachusetts team, fighting for that 6th seed, 5th seed, possibly, depending on how everything goes. So this is a nice hyped game of the week here for me. There's some other big matchups going on. You got Pittsburgh, Seattle. You got Sky Shaymans and Lincoln Lanterns playing, which are all really good teams, but none of those at this point really has playoff-like implications. So we'll turn it around. Chicago, my key to the game, turning it around. Ivan's on a bit of a not slide was what I meant to type, but the playoffs are not out of reach for him. He's got TP sitting in the 6th seed, which he wants. So if you're gonna knock out, take care of the competition, here's your chance to kind of take it into your own hands and take out TP, put him down a notch, get your 3rd win, get your guys' records equalized, and really get yourself in an interesting position for that playoff race. TP, all of a sudden, TP is one of the favorites, maybe between him and Shy Crow to scoop up that 6th seed, or maybe even possibly slide in higher, depending on how everyone does ahead of him. So it's really interesting. I think TP's got an opportunity here to really make a statement win. If you want to make the playoffs, you had to beat the teams that are below you in the standings, record-wise, because you're going to take losses for some of the upper-tier coaches when you play them in this league. Just the nature of how competitive and the parity we have in the upper half of the bracket, everyone beating each other. So if you want to be up there, you got to beat these lower-tier teams. So any thoughts really quick about the matchup here going forward, Shaymin or Sam? I know you don't know the teams too well,
Yeah.
Sam, but any quick thoughts, and then we can move on forward between the playoff picture and then the most exciting part, the guest segment.
Yeah, this game has massive implications for the playoff race, just because this is the 6th versus the 8th seed. There are 2 people with 3 wins and 2 people with 2 wins. So if you're Mike or if you're Shy Crow, you're watching this game and you're looking at it and you're now seeing who you have to beat. Like if Shy Crow picks up a win and Ivan wins this game, now Shy Crow has that 4th spot. I mean, not 4th, 6th spot in playoffs. So this is just massive playoff implications, and I love that it's the game that's being highlighted this week.
Yeah, and I think it's fun to watch coaches play for seeding like that.
Seeding,
and when your records are close like this, and there's still a fair amount of season left for separation to happen, you can still get some interesting stuff out of that. Because it's still it leads to head-to-head advantages, and there's no better way to get a swing against someone who you're competing for a playoff spot with than to beat them. You take a win, they take a loss. It'll be a good game, I think, and judging by what I saw from both of those coaches this week, that's something that's kind of worth hyping up.
It's got kind of the 2 meme teams, the full volt turn U-turn team versus the Chata boom burst spam team. So it's kind of fun. It'll be a fun matchup, but with playoff implications tied to it as well.
Yeah.
And really wanted to highlight these 2.
Meme of the season award implications.
That's true as well. We have a running end of the year award ceremony where we do give out a meme of the season award. All right, playoff picture. We've kind of been mentioning it the entire week. Here's the current seedings with differential. In our league, it goes by win-loss record, then the second tiebreaker's differential, followed by head-to-head record. So a lot of tight differentials here. I didn't know. I realized I was actually the 3rd seed. Adam has the head-to-head advantage over me, but I have 1 different differential. So big, even for the upper seeds kind of coming in, because, for my situation, do I really want to be the 3rd seed and possibly play Shy Crow in the first round of the playoffs? I'm not sure if I do, but exciting race here, and like we've talked about throughout this entire podcast or video, a lot of 3-loss teams, a smattering of 2-loss teams, and then the 4-loss teams are going to start cannibalizing each other here. Actually, we've all played each other, but after this week, we would have all played each other. But still, what I'm saying is still standing. There's going to be some movement, I think, in seeding. I'm really hoping that some of these, that 7-6 seed can kind of be a fight over that. Maybe someone else can kind of sneak in here in case one of these 2-loss teams starts to slide. Any thoughts before we move on to the guest segment, guys?
TP, Shakro, Ivan, and Mike. And then I guess Adam or Champ, if they lose this week. I mean, then the loser of Adam and Champ. That will be a very, very tight group, and that'll be really fun to watch.
For sure, I 100% agree with that. You got one of these 4-2 teams is going to be 4-3 after it's all said and done. If TP wins, he's tied at 4-3 with them, so it's going to make it interesting. And then Shaymin here sitting right there with a 3-3 record. If he wins, he's 4-3. So it could be a mess here going in with a lot of different differential, and stuff's going to be tight here, which is I always like playoff races. Last season it was really boring. Playoff was decided by like week 8 or something like that. But we'll go from here. Ready for our guest segment, guys? This is the most exciting part for me. Why we're having Sam on today. You guys ready for this, or do you want anything to say about playoff pitcher, Sam?
No, I think I'm good. I don't really know these teams well enough to comment more than that. But yeah, it seems you guys have an excellent system here. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be fun. I agree with that. So, guest segment, replacing Marv Reacts. I've asked Shaymin and Sam to join me here on the NPBL recap show today to we've gotten some feedback through general chat that I feel like there's some players in the league, and even some of the more veteran players in the league, myself included, it's always good to hear someone else's perspective on prep and how they go about doing it. I've had a few people message me or people just kind of comment in general chat. They don't know where to start with prep. They don't know what to do in order to prep. Like I always mention, and Shaymin talks a lot about, you need to do better prep. What does that mean? So I reached out to someone I really respect their ability to prep and his ability to communicate that in a coherent way in Sam. So Sam's going to lead a discussion here for us on kind of a guest segment on his segment about how he goes about prepping. And we'll kind of do a Q&A with me and Shaymin. We'll ask questions, maybe throw in some tidbits that we think are important. But after that, I'm going to have Sam take the floor here. And go ahead. Start. How do you go about prepping, Sam? So talk us through your kind of process here.
I mean, I'm kind of lucky, I've been playing in this format for about a year now, and I was lucky when I started to have first off some IRL friends to come alongside and talk about prep with me, and nowadays I build a lot with close friends, people like Adam and Clutch from RDL. I just about always build with people most of the time. Yeah, it's probably about 2 and 3 build sessions I do with somebody else, but my process is always kind of the same. And really, I think I wrote down for the notes to this. It's it's a good exercise in team building. It's very interesting. For a lot of people, it's kind of the most fun part of draft. I think Clutch has said that he enjoys prep more than he enjoys battling sometimes.
I think I would
comes and goes.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think I get more enjoyment out of sitting down prepping than I do. I enjoy battling. Obviously, I do it. I enjoy battling, but prep is the most fun for me. Trying to find weaknesses or find clever sets. I would agree with that.
And I think that kind of to me, this is why Draft League is, in my opinion, the best form of playing Mons. And the reason for that is because it doesn't just come down to the 6 that you see across from you like it does in a ladder battle where, you can have hacks. It's just sometimes things are just kind of not entirely random, but Mons, the battling aspect of Mons is just one part of it. And being able to have this component where you're prepping for someone who's also prepping for you makes the game a lot more interesting. Especially because you can really prep circles around each other. You can out prep your opponent. All sorts of things can happen. But to kind of get into the main meat of all of this, what I wanted to talk about is in my prep considerations, when I'm thinking about how I'm going to make a team to play somebody else, I typically think about 3 things, and I think I've listed them as bullet points. I think about threat assessment, and what I mean by that is looking across the aisle, so to speak, and looking at my opponent's roster and saying, all right, what are the things I need to break? What are the things I need to switch into? If my opponent has say a Porygon 2, I need an answer to that. I can't bring a team, as obvious as this maybe sounds, like I can't bring a team against a team with Porygon 2 that doesn't have a way to beat Porygon 2.
I mean, while how obvious that being said, I feel like it's a really important part. What does your team struggle against on the opposite side of the spectrum? So, or to simplify it even further, like, if the opponent has I'll just look at my current roster, which is kind of bizarre. Maybe that's not the best one, but we'll just look at my current team. I have a Clefable on my team, a bulky fairy. The opponent has a bulky fairy. You need to be able to sit down and recognize, do I struggle to break that or do I not struggle to break that? What do I need to do to go about that? So
yeah. And you think about things, especially like with Clefable, which is this terrifying setup threat. Like, if you get some Calm Minds, it can just sit there for a whole game. So I think you ask yourself questions like, how do I beat this in terms of like, do I roar it out? Do I have something that knows Clear Smog? Do I have a strong poison type breaker like a Nidoking that I could slap some specs on and then make it physical? Or like, wow, that's a bad idea. Don't put specs on Nidoking. Could I maybe like go for a Life Orb poison jab set, because that'll really hurt Fable. You can kind of spitball things where you're just like, okay, if I have a well built team, like if I have like good team synergy, I should ideally be able to, in my prep, come up with something for anything.
And it also
go ahead.
Oh yeah, and it also brings up the question of whether or not you want to offensively answer something or you want to defensively answer something, or ideally you have a way to handle it both ways.
Because there's a difference between being able to revenge something and being able to switch into something. Like somewhat obviously, but like there becomes this issue sometimes where people are like, oh, I'll just revenge kill. Like, you think about like Darmanitan, right? Like people are like, oh, well, I can just, I can get, like, I can always outspeed Darmanitan and kill it. It's so weak. It's so frail. But like, if you don't bring something to switch into those flare blitzes, you're going to have a bad time. And so that's what I mean. Like looking across the aisle or like doing threat assessment is looking to the other side and being like, all right, here's their big threats. Here are their walls. Here are their breakers. How am I going to find a balance of switching into their problems and also offensively checking their breakers or their setup sweepers or their win cons, etc. And then, like, to kind of add to the mix of that, you also have to find ways to win. You need you really do want to win con in draft, in my opinion, just because it kind of helps to simplify the thought process when you're playing. You can kind of continue. Go ahead.
I think to build upon that thought, I actually think that's very important. And maybe if you find yourself being newer to Draft League or maybe less experienced, I find that having a win condition on your team actually simplifies building for yourself. So using examples from my own teams that I've drafted, last year I made a concerted effort that I wanted a win condition or multiple win conditions. So I drafted a Pokemon like Mega Gyarados, Haxorus. I had Pokemon on my roster that were, while from a utility standpoint, they had utility possibilities, but for the most part standpoint, I was bringing them, and when I brought them, I was bringing them to win the game. How do I win this game? And I would sit down, look at the opponent. I would look across and threat assess on the other side. Do they have a check for Mega Gyarados? They have some soft checks, just things I call soft checks. They have things that can't hard wall it. They can't full stall it. It's not a melodic. It can't just sit in front of it and click recover and things like that. But they have soft checks. Okay, if they have those, how do I get around those? So drafting a win condition I find is very important. So being able to, when you draft a team or when you build your team, how are you going to win the game? Do you have you outspeed something with a Scarfer that hits hard enough that it's going to just sweep everyone out of the way? I find that to be find a win condition. I agree with that one. So go ahead and elaborate more on that more. I think that's a good point.
Yeah. And win conditions aren't necessarily all setup sweepers. Sometimes it's something like, oh, hey, I've got this crazy breaker. Let's say like I've got a Salazzle and I look across and I see, oh, hey, this team really doesn't have good fire switch-ins. And they're kind of slower than my Salazzle. Like I might as well, throw specs on that. Or even like, Nasty Plot if you want to go the setup route. But like specs brings a lot of instant power to that. And you can just throw off these big hits and just kind of try and force them to answer your question, of like, what are your Salazzle switch-ins?
Also just like in the game, it almost tells you like what you need to prioritize saving and what members of the team you can let go down. I mean, you can be like late game and it'll be tough, and you know you have to let something die, and it's a very hard decision of what you're going to let go down. But if you have that win condition, it almost tells you like what you can't let go down, so then you know what else you can.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's one of the things that like causes a really substantial jump in player like general skill in Mons is starting to learn to evaluate your paths to winning, like keeping track of your win cons, we call it, right? Like you're keeping track of your win conditions where you're like this thing to be able to win this game, and I cannot sacrifice it. You know, I can sacrifice other things that have less utility. You know,
100% agree. I think that's a really important. I think, that's a very. I would agree with that as well. I'll say I'm like, yes. I think the skill jump happens when you're able to sit down. You see the opponent sick after drafting. You're prepping for the 11, and then you see the 6 versus 6 matchup and being able to go, this is how I'm going to win this game. And it might be more than just a single answer. It might be a mix of two. But like putting being able to recognize what Shaymin said. Evaluate what's important, what's not important, and have that in consideration. So finding ways to win.
Definitely. And so then I think the final thing I have for note when you're like throwing together a team is to consider synergies. I think like this is kind of a minor one because if your team is kind of well drafted, maybe you have kind of a core in there that you really like from laddering, or like a couple mons that work together. You obviously want to cover your key threats as weaknesses, right? Like if you have a Heatran and that's a key part of your game plan, you probably want to have like a ground immunity or a strong ground resist somewhere. And you want to throw that into games where you're like, oh, like I'm playing, I have a Heatran, or maybe let's say like I have Heatran and Tapu Bulu, and I'm going up against a Garchomp team. Like, and I want to bring Heatran. I should probably also bring Tapu Bulu because it's a, pretty solid switch into Garchomp. It makes him like think about, clicking Poison Jab, or it makes him think twice about just coming in on Heatran with this big scary Garchomp. Like that's what I call
spamming,
like
spamming EQ and stuff along those lines.
Yeah, exactly. So you think, I think you have to think when I've thrown these threats on. I have these things that I like their matchup against my opponent. But I want to make sure that I also have ways to protect my big threats. And sometimes that's through like synergies in terms of like resistances. Sometimes that's through bringing like wish support or clerical support. Yeah.
No, anything you want to elaborate with that on, Shaymin, before I get my thoughts in?
Yeah, I mean, team synergy is also, it's extremely, extremely important in prep, but it's also important when you actually draft a team. And I know this is more focused on prep, but if you draft a roster that has a lot of team synergies, it's really easy to prep with those synergies.
Agreed. Yeah. No, this really does start with the draft.
Of course. But I think, just from some people's standpoints, they draft in what their mind's a good team, and then they play the game, and they're like, why am I not getting the results? Or I don't know what to do to get the results that I want. So, if, for example, like looking at my team, I have a whole bunch of silly synergy. I drafted a kind of, not meme team, but just like a more, I wanted to try some new stuff out this year. So I drafted a Metagross. What's Metagross weak against? It's weak against, Earthquake and Fire Stab. It's got more weaknesses than that, but Earthquake and Fire Stab. So to pair that with it, I drafted a Hydreigon to kind of alleviate the Earthquake, the Ground Stab with the Levitate ability, and then with its Dragon typing, resist the Fire Stab. So like you said, building synergies, whether through typings, through abilities, as this example gives both, is important. And then you can even, from the draft standpoint, minimize that to a prep standpoint with a 6v6 and kind of have, like you said, if your main win condition is your, Metagross, you need to kind of put things around that put Metagross in its best possible position to win, whatever the matchup is. And again, least important probably is like exactly like abilities and how they work together. Typings are important. This all kind of starts with drafting, but it's important to recognize that when you're doing this, like, and when you're team building, when you're prepping, how you go about doing that. So, anything building myths. I thought this was a really good, interesting one when you sent me the notes. So go ahead and go over building myths.
Oh yeah, let's try and let's see. I have a couple of these that I wanted to talk about because, like, I do think that there are certain, I guess, patterns that people fall into, or like things that they hear, and I wanted to kind of like talk about how some of those things aren't always true.
And I'm guilty.
So,
Honestly, when I read this list, I was kind of like, you know what? I'm partially guilty of one of these. So go ahead, keep going.
so like the first one I listed was always speed tech. And for like, you know, just to like as means of like a quick explanation, just in case somebody doesn't know, when we talk about speed teching in draft, what that is basically, you know, let's say I have, you know, Rotom Wash and my opponent has a Necrozma. Necrozma's base 79 speed and my Rotom is base 86. If I want to always outspeed Necrozma, I'm just going to add enough speed to be faster than, like, 1 point faster than Necrozma. I'll always go first. I don't need to go max speed Timid or anything like that. And that's a really common practice in draft because speed is one thing where, you know, the game just checks which speed stat is greater. It doesn't do anything else. So, like, if you're 1 point faster than the one thing that's slower than you, you're faster than everything else that is slower than you as well. So that's the whole point of speed teching. I listed this because I remember when I first like got into draft, I'd be all about speed teching. I was like, everything, you know, my Heatran's always speed teched, my Tapu Bulu is always speed teched. And the reason that I advise against that is because I think sometimes it, like, you have to evaluate how much speed you're putting into your Pokemon. Because sometimes, like, getting, you know, like a good example would be Heatran with Rotom Wash or something, where, like, you know, I could EV my Rotom Wash to always outspeed Heatran, but am I really afraid of what Heatran's going to do for me? Is it worth me pouring 200 plus EVs into my speed stat if I could just put all of those into hit points or into Spadef or into another stat? I find that, like, once things get below like the base 80 range, it becomes kind of, there's like a diminishing returns to doing speed teching. Like, because you're already you're only gonna, like, you're gonna invest all these EVs and speed like maybe half the other team. You know, if you're up in the hundreds, like 90s, 100s, 110s, absolutely speed tech unless you're running a bulkier set, because you're gonna outspeed most of the other person's team anyway. You know, there's a diminishing returns to making something that has like base 70 speed outspeed the one thing that's slower than it, or the two or three things. Like, if that makes sense.
It's threat assessment. What do you really need to outspeed? And then, like, you don't need to outspeed something that you can easily defensively handle.
Exactly.
It's assessing what you want to outspeed and then giving the EVs, and then also doing the calcs to make sure that even with those speed EVs, you can have enough bulk or enough attack. What you want to do.
And I guess the last thing I'll add to this is to kind of both of you have said excellent points, so I don't really need to say much. But like you mentioned, Sam, like I don't know my my English isn't as good as it probably should be, even though I'm a native speaker. You know, speed has there's a more elegant way to say this. Is what I'm trying to get at. Like, not besides diminishing returns, it's like a zero sum all. Like, you're either faster or you're not faster.
Yeah.
You know, if you're partially bulk invested, you always have those HP EVs. Like, they're still there. They don't go anywhere. So if I'm 100 EVs invested in HP, I always have those. When I take a Ice Shard, when I take a priority move, when I take a Surf or whatever, like, I have those HP. I have that investment. All the stats like this are like this in Mons, except speed. Like you said, you're either faster or you're slower, and that's it. There's no difference. There's no like that. So if you don't invest enough speed, or if it's, like you guys have pointed out, not important, those large chunk of EVs, which are like the best part of Mons, that's the part I like to mess with the most, is my EVs, are like are in air quotes wasted. There's obviously considerations for matchups if you want things, if you have to be faster for certain circumstances, it's important to do that. But I will agree with that. When I first started playing, every single thing on my team was speed tacked in some variety. And like, I'll throw in a few speed, I don't know. I feel like it's a really good one to highlight. So anything you want to kind of close out with the speed tech myth, I think is important. So I'll let you finish out on that one.
No, I think that's really covers it. And I think that it's like speed teching is an important thing to like have in your draft arsenal. Like, it's something that kind of naturally falls, because what you should be doing is recognizing, and this is why we talk about speed tiers being important, is that, like, you don't want to leave a gap in your base speeds that's so big that your opponent can run their breakers adamant or modest or plus attack plus special attack natures. Yeah, speed teching is like a great thing to do, but it's not always the right thing to do. You have to evaluate whether or not those EVs are worth it.
I would agree.
It should not. It should not take away from what you want the Pokemon to do. With like, sorry, having the speed EVs should not take away from what you wanted the Pokemon to do in the first place.
Yeah.
If you want to go to wall a Pokemon, and then adding speed EVs will not allow you to do it, then it's not worth it, in my opinion.
Agreed. All right, so I actually want to add one in here for a build myth that like we kind of touched on this earlier. Super effective is good. That's a myth to me, by the way. Like, super effective hits are fantastic, but I think that there's an error that people fall into when they're building sometimes, where they're like, oh, I've got a super effective move to hit like Milotic, or I've got a super effective move to hit Porygon 2, or I've got coverage to hit X, Y, or Z wall. And I have to be honest, like, that's not always good enough. I mean, just because you can hit something super effectively does not mean you can kill it.
Yeah.
You need to calc it. Calcing is always you have to calc and see what move does the most damage, not just super effective. I know TP has had times where he's like clicked Drill Run with Mega Beedrill when Poison Jab does the same damage and has 100% accuracy.
Yeah. Or like another example for me is like the Elemental Lopunny. You have
that's a great example.
If they don't resist return, and Fire Punch or Ice Punch is a like just a +2 super effective hit, like you're not like fire punching a Ferrothorn, for instance, then return would do more. The only case in which coverage is really in my opinion, honestly, the only time that coverage is worth a move slot is when the thing you're trying to hit is either really bulky, like carrying Stone Edge or Thunderbolt to like hit Mandibuzz, for instance, is one thing, or in the case that something like resists your stabs. If something resists Mega Lopunny's stabs, which to be fair, it's really difficult to have something that does that. I mean, normal fighting is just such good neutral coverage.
Agreed.
So like there's a certain point at which like running coverage just to get a super effective hit doesn't mean that you're doing more damage than you would with your super powerful stab move.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think I agree with that after hearing you talk it out. I think it comes down to calcing what you're running coverage for and evaluating from there. Yeah, for the most part, I agree with that assessment.
I will say that like I've told people before that like mental math can be kind of important to Pokemon. Like you can always go and calc things if you want, but learning to multiply by like 1.5 and by 2 in your head, you can just because you just start with the base power of a move and you do a little bit of mental calculation and you can figure out which like high jump kick is going to high jump kick to a grass type, like to say like Tangrowth is going to do more than Fire Punch to Tangrowth.
Yep.
And you can just and that's math that you can do in your head if you practice it a little bit.
That's it. No, you're right. You're right.
That coming from the physics grad student over here. I get that not everyone loves math as much. Anyways, so you think we've covered that? Is there anything more to say there?
No, I'm happy with that one.
Well, so a third myth that I wanted to talk about is something that I wrote down is tech is better than non-tech.
This is the one I'm guilty of. Okay, keep going.
Everyone's guilty of this. Because I had this conversation with I'm part of a league where every week we add up all of the sets that we think were cool. Like people can post their sets when they think, oh, like made a really cool like Tapu Fini set, or I made a really cool Heatran set, and it did this thing. You post it to kind of like a top plays of the week channel, and while that's kind of cool, like it's kind of an interesting thing to have like this kind of archive of really interesting sets. What I think I've seen some coaches be guilty of is bringing things that are absurdly teched, just like they were trying to like account for some very, very small edge case scenario, and it didn't even happen. The set didn't even really work. And so like I remember like in that league having a discussion with someone where it basically came down to a super standard set that works is way better than a super tech set that doesn't work.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that. Sometimes I'm very guilty of this, and there's two examples that we can reference very recently in the NPBL's history or games lately that are examples of that. We had Imprison Alolan Ninetales.
Yeah.
Literally, the move slot, like, it was sweet if it worked on Ditto, because the idea behind it, and from my understanding, talking to Landa, was that way I couldn't set screens with my own Ditto to have like both us have Aurora Veil up, because we were both Hail teams, to kind of give you an idea. Sam. So like, but it didn't do anything. So it was almost like he had 3 move slots, and there's other issues with the team draft. One that I can probably talk about more freely is my week 4 loss to Adam, Pittsburgh Pre-Marina. I got in my laboratory, I sat down at my computer, and I thought I was so smart. I brought 0 attacks Thunderous Incarnate. It was a Prankster boosted Incarnate that was going to be like a stall breaker, toxic stall with sub, protect, defog, or something like that. And I got 5-0'd because my Thunderous couldn't, because he didn't bring his walls. He didn't bring as many walls as he thought he would bring. And then I had this set that I'm like, you can't protect. For the most part, you can't protect, sub stall a Lopunny with your toxic damage. Like, that's just not. The math doesn't work out for you that way. So, I was too techy. It came out and butt me. If I would have, smacked the Lopunny with like a stab thunder move or a volt switch or something, possibly I could have put myself in a much better position in that game. That wasn't the case. I mean, I'm just trying to give you a brief example, but I think what you're trying to communicate is, Smogon sets, standard sets, they're standard sets for a reason, and that's because they're effective and they work. Like, there's edge case scenarios where, like you said, people think they have to bring tech because, I have to be techie. The guy won't see it coming. Maybe they won't see it coming. It's because it's so bad that it doesn't work. It always feels good when your tech works, but for every time your tech does work, there's going to be times where it loses you games as well. And sometimes standard sets are again, they're standard for a reason. That's because they're the, in air quotes, best sets. But go ahead and continue to elaborate. I've gone on far enough.
Yeah, I think that, and that brings up some point here, that there's nothing wrong with Smogon standard sets for sure. When you do take a Smogon set, go through each move and evaluate its usefulness against your opponent. Because, like, if you grabbed, like, it's really common for Smogon sets to, like, for, like, Heatran, it'll have, like, the dual stab. It'll have, like, Lava Plume and Flash Cannon, for instance. And it's worth looking at your opponent's team and being like, do I really need both of these moves? Like, if they don't have good fire resists, and the things that resist fire are water types, so they're, like, they resist Flash Cannon anyway, and, they don't have a good fairy, so I don't need Flash Cannon coverage as badly. Like, you can just run one stab. Like, go through all of the moves and make sure that you still need them. Make sure that the coverage moves that are there are still actually good against your opponent. And if not, replace them with something else. Like, there's nothing wrong with using standard sets, but make sure that they're good against your opponent.
Yeah, I think in the end of the day, you should be bringing the sets that realistically you believe has the greatest chance of being successful. You aren't trying to. No one's going to give you an award, really, if you just go like 100% tech and it works beautifully. We will like say that was a good set. It is what's most important. And if it takes using somewhat standard sets that are altered for your matchup, then that's what's most important.
Yeah, for sure.
With all this being said, I guess we should preface lastly, this is for if you're trying to be competitive at Draft League. Obviously, if what you enjoy in playing Pokemons is bringing memes and tech sets, then you do you. We're coming at this from trying to be we're trying to get wins in a Draft League setting, or we're trying to improve in a Draft League setting. So I guess I just wanted to preface that. Go ahead.
Yeah, memes are amazing. Everyone should have one meme Pokemon on their team.
Yeah. Yo, Clutch drafted, quick aside that will take 5 seconds. Clutch drafted Shelmet in a league. It's a tier 5 spike setter. It gets both spikes. So. Yeah. It showed up once and then he dropped it.
I drafted Dugong. And
you did bring it 1 week, if I remember.
I did bring it, and I clicked Perish Song on a Calm Mind Raikou, so at least I kind of stopped it from sweeping.
Wow, wow, that's kind of nice. kind of clean.
Then I picked up Delcatty.
He did pick up. He traded Delcatty.
Yeah, Gooey. I traded a Delcatty for Girder.
We're getting off topic. Keep going.
So I think the last like build myth I had, which was something I discussed with a friend recently, was the always bring your high tiers myth. Your high tiers are high tiers for a reason, but there are times when they won't have matchup. You know, if you drafted Volcanion as a breaker or like Mimikyu as a like final sweeper, maybe you're gonna run into weeks where like Volcanion is like has to try and break another bulky water type that's faster than it. Like it has to go up against a Suicune, and it's not a Z user, so you can't really use Solar Beam or something. Like, you know, there are weeks where your stuff just doesn't have matchup, and you have to look for another way around it. And I don't advocate not bringing something just because it's like it's good. Like I know, like I've heard people kind of have this attitude of like, oh, this thing is so good in this matchup, and so I'm not going to bring it because it's going to throw them way off, and they're going to over prep for it. And I don't think that that's like, if something's good in a matchup, in my opinion, is that you should bring it and make them deal with it. Like make your opponents like, if Alakazam's really good against your opponent, bring Alakazam and see how they deal. Like, but like at the same time, if if Alakazam doesn't have a matchup, they still have to prep for it. You know, if you're prepping for somebody else, you're still looking at their big threats, even when their big threats aren't that threatening to you. You know what I mean?
For sure.
So yeah, like don't feel like you always have to bring your tier. There are weeks where your lower tiers can shine by just showing up, and it also, for the record, depends on your team structure.
For sure, I feel when I draft a team with the intention of using all 11 mons, and I feel like that's probably one of my better strengths is I bring what I think is the best every week in order for me to win. Like there's been multiple times where I've gone into big games and I have my tier 5, my tier 4, and 2 tier 3s on my roster. Like if that's what I feel I have to do to win, or based on matchup, based on my threat assessment of looking at the opponent's team, finding the way I'm going to win, and then kind of considering how I've drafted my team with synergy. I don't like my team when I do my prep. I don't have tiers next to my mons. I just have their freaking stats, like my base speeds and my names, and kind of that's what I look at. When I don't care what tier the mon is, if I'm bringing or not. That has nothing to do with it. I mean, like you said, they're tiered for reasons. My higher tier mons are going to make more appearances as the season go out, but that necessarily doesn't mean that I'm never going to bring my tier 5 mons, or it's a tier 5 mon, I don't want to bring it too much. Like I bring them when I feel like they're going to be useful. So I agree with that. I think that's one of my better strengths is I bring what I feel like is the best for my team to win.
And and you don't discount things because they're like lower tiers or anything. Like, I mean, I just had a like the season that I just finished up was like a 15-week Wi-Fi league. And I would like one of my like the things that I was really proud of is like a lot of my higher tier stuff did come more often, but like I had a really, really nice distribution across the way. Like most of my mons had like on average 7 or 8 brings, even my lower tier stuff. You know, it's like I think I had a Steelix at tier 5 that came 8 different
Wow,
matches.
really? Like Steelix is garbage too.
But it was good on this team. I won't. I'm not going to defend myself more than that.
No, I'm just messing with you.
I mean, Archeops for me has done wonders this season.
Archeops is fun. And Custap Berry's out, so sturdy mons are about to get better.
Ooh.
Yeah.
If Custap had been legal, I was going to run Custap Explosion Steelix in the finals. Good set.
All right, we're over an hour, so let's try to wrap it. You guys are doing great. Let's try to wrap this up. How to build when your matchup is rough. I feel like, I guess if we're gonna help newer players to the league, players that are interested in drafting, getting better at draft, how do you build when you just sit down and you look at stuff and you have a in air quotes bad matchup where you just feel like the opponent's team is just better against yours for whatever reason than yours is against him or hers.
So my answer for that is pretty consistently like baiting sets, things that like take advantage of like using an unexpected choice scarf or specifically like my favorite tactic is always super effective berries.
I 100%.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah, I think all three of us bring super effective berries a ton, like all the time. I've watched a lot of Shaymin battles. I play all mine, and I've at least watched enough of Sam's battles when I was watching the RDL relatively consistently. When I played in it, and then the following season I would still watch some battles between players I really liked. We always we all three of us bring super effective berries a lot,
because those are fantastic items, because like especially when you look across the way and you're like, this thing is so good, like like this Garchomp is so good against me, or this X, Y, or Z is so good against me. I need something to like make sure that it doesn't get too far. A super effective berry is fantastic for that.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
And also just you can they can like bring in one of their offensive threats with so much confidence, thinking that you're forced to switch, or you're just gonna have to let the thing go down, and then you just gain so much momentum because you can survive the hit, maybe take it out, or just do a lot of damage in return, and just put you in such a good spot going on.
Yeah, like I think back to like one of the first battles in draft I ever played was like I had Gyarados, and the guy I was playing was like I was really scared of his team, honestly. And he had a Nido King, and I was like, I don't even know how I'm going to deal with this Nido King if it comes. And so I slapped a Wakan Berry, the electric super effective berry, on my Gyarados, and it swung the battle, because all of a sudden this big scary breaker of his that outspeeds my Gyarados comes in with all the confidence in the world that he can KO me, falls short, and then eats a waterfall. It was like, that's the moment that I was forever sold on super effective berries.
No, I agree. I feel like just from even pseudo trap sets type things, not actually trapping your opponent, but trap sets like that, like they come in to revenge kill something, and then they quite can't get there, and that helps you put it in range for other mons of yours, or KOs it, like Shaymin said. I feel when your matchup's rough, there's things you can do to mitigate that for sure. And
there's things and one last thing I'd say on that as well, real quick, is I think that sometimes in like rough matchups, it helps to focus on your win conditions more. Like, don't ignore the team across from you. Like, try to answer things as best as you can, but look for ways that you can win out. Like, look for ways that you can grab the momentum early, and like, maybe you have a setup sweeper that's really good against them, even if you can't switch into their breakers. Look for something that you can feel like can go into the matchup feeling confident with. And if you don't win it, like, everyone has bad matchups some weeks. There's no such thing as a good or a perfect team. You're never going to go into every match in a season feeling great. So
no, I agree with that. I think that's helpful to people to cover your weaknesses with berries, with sashes, focus sashes, things along those lines, and try to maybe again focus more on how you're going to win the game than stopping everything on the opponent's side of the field. That this might not be possible. Yeah, I think those are really good. Any other things you want to say about matchups before we move on to our general tips, where we'll kind of have a open floor discussion before we wrap this show up?
Okay. I think I'm pretty good.
You good, Shaymin? All right, I assume that means he's good. General other tips.
Sorry, yeah.
You're good. You're good. Last kind of tips about prep or just anything generally you felt like it didn't fit anywhere before. We'll have kind of a little bit of open floor discussion here before we wrap up. Anyone feel free to take the floor.
Yeah. Well, I have my like general tips and things which I can go over pretty quickly, and like the three things that I thought of were like, I've seen some people who are more experienced with prep kind of get into this mode where they're like, oh, this Pokemon on the other side won't come at all. Like, there's no way it shows up. It's only come to like one match before, so it's definitely not coming. I don't need to prep for it. When you prep, like, try to think, like, look through their list and make sure that you have an idea of how you would deal with any given thing with your 6. I think that's really important. Like, it helps keep you from getting walled by looking. Like, my quintessential example was actually in RDL Season 3 when I was playing a coach, and I just, like, he hadn't brought Jellicent in, like, 8 weeks, and I'd heard him talk about how he was kind of out on it. Like, it wasn't really his thing anymore. And so, like, me and my build partner didn't build for Jellicent at all. Like, we didn't bring any Toxic Mons or anything. And as soon as the match started and I saw Jellicent, I realized I have nothing for this. Like, I have an Infernape that can't break it at all. Yeah. I have, there was no way I was getting past Jellicent. And I lost the game horribly because of it. And that was just because, and if I had just said, well, this thing is, this thing could come, so I should make sure I have an answer for it somewhere. Like maybe I should have Toxic on this Pokemon in the back.
For
then
sure.
I would have been fine. The other two things I want to say is like as much as I've talked about like tech and like like standard sets being better than non-standard sets, like don't be afraid to be creative, but be sure to balance it with things that you're comfortable with. If you bring a tech set every week that kind of is interesting and like that's great.
But if you bring 4 tech sets every week, like
that's a bit much.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like, you don't need that. Like your creativity, like you'll catch people off guard with some creativity here and there, but the general effect of catching people off guard is kind of overrated in my opinion. Compared to using sets that are
effective,
known to be good, like that are effective, even if they're common. And,
I would agree with that for sure.
And yeah, the last thing I have is, and I think a lot of people do this already, and this is get feedback on your prep. If you have friends that you can build with, whether like online or otherwise, absolutely do that. Ask friends and other coaches what they think. For the most part, you'll be able to find people in just about every who are relatively helpful.
For sure.
Most people are happy to like offer some commentary, and if they're not, they'll tell you. Like they'll just tell you they're busy or something. But yeah, that's my thing. Is that like I build with people very frequently because that's like, and that because it also just makes it more fun. You can sit around there and you can like laugh about the dumb tech that you thought about bringing, and maybe bring it, maybe not.
For sure.
Yeah. So those are my 3 things.
I just have a little to add on to that last one. It's great to get other people to help you. But you should not up your entire like play style. Like I think all of us have like our own like personal style, like how we build and how we play. And I think that you should definitely you can definitely go a little bit out of what you're comfortable with, but you should definitely you can build with other people. Just don't just make sure that you are confident in your ability to actually use those sets and that you feel comfortable using the game plan that you created.
Yeah, I think don't take a team from somebody else if you don't feel comfortable with it, or if there's things that you would change. I think that comes down to as well, like even when you build with other people, like ask other people for advice, kind of stand up for yourself. Be willing to be like, if someone's like, oh, this set is no good, or like I don't think this set is any good, come back with them and say, well, yeah, that's what I like. I think that's what I want to use. Just because someone says something is bad, like there's, or it isn't as like the best set, doesn't always mean that it is actually bad.
Maybe
take everyone's advice with a grain of salt.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's a really good piece of advice. Maybe I'm even guilty of that a little bit. Sometimes I see a set and I'm like, that set looks terrible. You know what? I'm not the one building the game plan, running the calcs, looking at things. Like I think that's a very good piece of advice. The thing I would like to add to that, kind of to complement that, is when people reach out to me to build. I'm happy to help people. I'm happy to give feedback, but I'm not going to build for people. That's one thing that this is maybe a personal side, or I'm just venting. I don't know. I just don't like it when people message me and go like, "Hey, can you help me build for X this week?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no problem. Send me your stuff." And they're like, "Well, I don't have anything." And it's like, well, dude, I don't know. I'm not like, I don't know. Maybe it's a personal front, but when you come to someone, I think it's helpful to kind of, here's my sets. Here's my you don't have to write them like a 10-page document about how you're going to win the game, but here's the sets I'm thinking of. Here's what I kind of feel like, my general idea is for everything. That's really helpful to me to kind of get into the mindset of what your thinking is going, because otherwise, like, sometimes I struggle to help people because all I get is a list of sets with a whole bunch of coverage moves, and I'm like, it looks good to me. Like, your coverage looks good, but I don't know what else is going on here. So have kind of like a small, like, asterisk next to there going, I'm going to try to win with this Pokemon, and I'm going to try to, stall out with this Pokemon, and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's helpful for me to get a little bit of direction with helping people. So I don't know if that's, it's not say a building tip, but just kind of open floor discussion thing.
Yeah.
And you can go.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. And like, I think something to say on that as well is like, if you have good friends who you actually like, I definitely could go into prep sometimes with people that I know, and like, we start with nothing and build up a team. But the key there is that I know them. Like that's a thing that we do together. You can't just like you probably like if you're gonna develop that kind of relationship with somebody, like the way that you should start is by sending full teams first. Like because it's not like it's a big like
it's a time commitment.
Yeah, it's a time commitment.
It's a big
like
time commitment.
I'm not gonna sit down and build a team with just if they're my friend, I'll sit down with them, and like if I know them personally, I'll sit down and like build with them. But other than that, like if somebody PMs me randomly from one of my leagues and is like, "Hey, could you sit down and spend an hour talking through hypotheticals with me and building this team?" and be like, like I do have
some other stuff to do.
Yeah, just a little bit. Like
does it feel like it? Some people think I sit around just looking at Pokemon spreadsheets all the time. I do actually do other stuff occasionally.
Yeah.
No, but for closing back out here, I think, hopefully people find this helpful. Always feel free to reach out to me and Shaymin if you're the NPBL. I feel this is the most fun part of Pokemon for me is prep. It's kind of like sitting down, thinking of clever tech sets, thinking of standard sets, kind of getting my team to be synergistically working together, and really coming up with an overall like strategy. That's when I have the most fun during Mons. So building can be fun. It's not just homework. If you don't like building, and you like battling only, maybe try laddering or something like that instead. But I feel prep to be really rewarding and fun. Any other tips that I feel like giving, kind of maybe things I do differently? I guess the one thing I will start with is if you're newer to prepping or you feel like your prepping isn't up to par, come up with a starting spot that you're to get, maybe even to just kind of get you rolling, get the brain moving, kind of thinking. A starting spot in your prep, whether that be, for me, for example, the first thing I do when I build for a team is I sit down and I write down speed tiers. I know that's simple. Everyone probably does it at some spot, but that's literally always the first spot I start with. I start with speed tiering. How fast is all their Pokemon? How fast are all my Pokemon? After that, I generally then kind of briefly look over kind of matchups, typings, and I kind of pick and then I do my threat assessment. What do I think is the scariest part of their team? What do I think is going to be the most threatening to my team? And that's kind of how I start prepping. And then I go from there between kind of making sets, messing with IVs, adding coverage moves, and it kind of fluidly goes from there. But I always start with speed tiering, and then from speed tiering move on to threat assessment. Just getting into a system when you're prepping for a battle is kind of make it almost like a habit, like write down on a piece of paper somewhere, type up on a Word document, just copy and paste your speed tiering somewhere so you don't have to type it up every time. I've had people go like, I don't like looking up speed tiering because it takes too much time. Take half the work out and write down yours somewhere. Do something along those lines to alleviate some of it. Get into a habit and kind of make prepping at least take some of the busy work out of it and make it kind of a routine. Anything you guys want to add?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So like I have all my teams organized. Make sure that you have your teams organized so that you can look back at what was successful and then build off of that. You're not building each week individually. Over time, you are getting a feel for your team, then you can see what was successful in certain scenarios and then use that to help you prepare for your next battle.
Yeah. I can echo that.
Yeah, I have a spreadsheet that I have literally it's when I started recording it. It goes back to RDL, actually. A spreadsheet that has literally all my team builders, my results from that match, and kind of, if possible, the link or the code for that match. So, like, literally at any point I can, like right now I'm staring at it, I could click and I can tell you exactly what my sets were that I lost to Sam with in the RDL Season 1. And that I didn't have Roar. But my point is, like, yes, like Sammy said, organize it, keep track of stuff. Maybe not important if you're just starting to get out building, but, if something's effective, if you came up with a set that was effective against, if you have a really fast electric type Pokemon, and you came up with a set that was super effective against a team with a singular ground type or a singular electric type Pokemon resist, and you run into a team that's similarly structured, that can be a helpful reference point for you to kind of look back and, save yourself some steps.
Definitely.
All right. Is everyone good with that? Anyone want to say something before we wrap this show up?
I think that's
it.
I think we're good.
Well, that's going to be it for the NPBL season 4, week 6. Recap. I got there eventually.
Gotcha. Nice.
Thanks for joining us, Sam. Sam from the RDL. A couple other sets. Do you want to like shout out anything before we wrap up here? You have a YouTube or stream or anything like that?
Man, I don't know. I make Draft League like analysis videos every so often. I made one on Heat Trend. Maybe I'll like talk excessive into linking that in the description or something.
Definitely can do that.
I make content from time to time. I play in the TPL, PCL, RDL. I was trying to think of a funny like 3-letter thing to throw in there. But nah, yeah, I play in a lot of leagues. If you see me, I go by Istanbuldayim, Sam, etc. Say hi. I'm happy to look at your prep. Just don't expect me to do it quickly.
So maybe we'll talk a little bit off camera about some stuff. Anything for you, Shaymin, before we close off here?
I'm just try to have some fun. I mean, this is all just for fun. It's obviously more fun to win, but you can still have some fun when you lose.
I can echo that sentiment. I could not
bring memes. Honestly,
but not even just memes. It's like throw on a wall breaker every once in a while. Just bring them on that you can just like you can click a button and get a kill, and it's very satisfying. Even if it only gets 1 kill, just try to have some fun.
Yeah, I agree with that. Mons is a game at the end of the day.
Exactly. Fun fact: I talked Clutch into bringing Pseudo Budo to a match this week. So like, that was my personal success. It was 30 step explosion Pseudo Budo. It set rocks and it did its job.
I'm noticing a theme here, like Flameward Facade, just like in the
my gosh. Yeah.
Anyways, this is excessive. NPBL Team Stealth rocks. It's the best move in the game.